the Chartered Institute of Personal Management.
Hi, everyone. Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Let me warmly welcome you on behalf of the Applied Research Committee of the Chartered Institute of Personnel Management to the international webinar on global HR practices. At the end of December, there was some story of a new virus coming up to affect the humankind. And within another couple of weeks, it started to spread, and we all by now have experienced a pandemic of greater proportions. When we discuss about research, we focus on conceptualizing, collecting data, analyzing, coming with findings, and either proving theories or falsifying theories. We say theory has a lot of value when it comes into practice. Now, the Applied Research Committee of the Chartered Institute of Personnel Management Sri Lanka thought it's opportune to see how real HR works, how the HR strategies and HR practices can contribute to organizations to face challenging times. And we are very fortunate here. We have an international audience and we have international experts to share their stories. So starting from China, where the pandemic started, going to Melbourne, going to London, UK, and ending up in Silicon Valley, California. So during this webinar, this is how we are going to focus on this issue. Initially, all the panelists will spend 3 minutes discussing how the pandemic has affected the organizations in their countries very briefly. After that, each of the expert panelists will spend about 10 minutes sharing details of HR strategies and HR practices that has helped to face this challenge successfully. Thereby, we will see the relationship between HR strategies and HR practices and performance. To start this, it's my pleasure to invite our expert panelist from China. Let me give a brief introduction of himself. Mr. Sloan, he's an expert in computer science, where he has got his degree from Nottingham Trent University, and also he's an expert on international business from University of Sheffield. He has been associated with many universities as an guest international lecturer. He's a board member of HK Chamber Invest, and he is the Secretary General of International Research Center for Neo-China Socialism, a practical think tank specialized in promoting the innovative cooperation between China and worldwide developing countries under Belt and Road initiatives. So they are focusing on rural revitalization and education cooperation, where Mr. Sloan plays a demanding role, and he's a highly reputed international lecturer and a practitioner. So it's my privilege to invite Mr. Sloan to start the webinar by sharing what happened to China, or the organizations in China in general, a brief description. Over to you.
Hi, everyone. My pleasure, my great pleasure to be invited to participate in such a meaningful and important event with our friends around the world. Okay, and then so let me just start sharing with my slide so that we can go one by one. So is it clear enough?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So once again, so it's great to meet you all, my dear friends. My name is Liu Yang Sloan, and today my topic is from static to dynamic, the self-evolution of HR department to combat COVID-19. And so my focus is under the current crisis and the challenges, how the HR department under different kinds of organizations can find a way to further develop themselves to better perform in the post-pandemic development. And so I want to start with a very core concept: is happy people equals to happy result. And I think that should be always the motto of HR professionals, especially under the current challenges, which has totally make an extreme turning over for the worldwide organizations and has caused different kind of adverse mental effect for the people, for the members of different kind of organizations as well. So, and we think that under the current situation, HR is here to support the career development and playing a much more dynamic and versatile multifunction role, and then which can be seamlessly involved into the micro operational segment of the organization. And then especially we put the focus on the human-to-human caring approaches. So though there will be some details which will be mentioned in my sharing in the following part. And so here in China, so chapter 1, the COVID-19 impacts on Chinese organizations. So very much unfortunately, as it well known to all, that China is the outbreak center for the COVID-19. And since China was the first one to encounter the outbreak of the COVID-19, there are any relative references which can be taken as a prevention or controlling methodologies for the Chinese government. So what we can do, or what we can do at the initial stage, is to shut down everything and to stop and to cease and to suspend all the economic activities in a very short moment. So it's in the sudden while all the organizations, including the public or the private organizations, that have shut down simultaneously. All the people initially at the initial stage, there's during the shutdown, that is during the Chinese New Year time, and people are not having any kind of problems working from home, this kind of problems, because basically they are just having holidays back home. But after when the Chinese New Year holiday finished, still the economic and many places, still the city, most of the city are still in a lockdown situation. So that is where how the stay at home and work from home kind of situation happened in China. And that is where how, that is since when the HR department has become a major role to take the responsibilities to adjust the sudden change for stabilizing the organization performances. Because there are no such preparations and as such before, and so no single organization, whether it's a company or this kind of school or this kind of public entity, have such preparation how to face, especially from the perspective of the HR department, how to coordinate those kind of personal, this kind of human-to-human to balance the human-to-human communication, as well as this kind of very smooth working operation. So that is extremely new challenges for all the HR professionals in China. And then, so luckily, we have witnessed some new changes, and that is what we call the self-evolution. And then to encounter such such difficulties. So this is the general background of my sharing. And then so Doctor, you see like any other questions or points that have to mention here?
Okay, thank you. So now we move into Melbourne, Australia. So we have Miss Rosemary Gatt. She's the General Manager, People and Culture from Australian HR Institute. She plays the lead HR role for Australian HR peak body, and she holds a unique privileged position as HR for HR. Her HR career has spanned more than 25 years in Australian and global organizations in both generalist human resource management and HR specialist roles in the retail, technology, and recruitment sectors. Her career has involved working with leaders and managers to create positive workplaces and ultimately successful organizations. Alongside her substantial generalist HR experience, Rosemary has specialized in career development and has been an active career coach and mentor to many HR professionals. Having taken advantage of flexible working arrangements herself for over 10 years and supported many individuals and managers to accommodate flexible working arrangements to improve retention. She's passionate about making these arrangements work for all. Since joining RE, Rosemary's contribution has included taking on the honorary role of secretary to the regional peak body, the Asia Pacific Federation of Human Resource Management, we call AFRAM. The federation is a member of the global HR body, the World Federation of People Management Association. Rosemary holds a master's degree in careers education and development from RMIT and an honors bachelor's degree in languages, Indonesian and Malay studies from the University of Sydney. She's an HRI fellow, certified human resources practitioner. So now it's my pleasure to invite Ms. Rosemary to share basic background of what happens to the organizations in Australia or probably in Melbourne. And then in the second round, she can give details of a particular organization. Over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Chandana. And please, if you could share my slides too. And thank you to CIPM Sri Lanka for putting on this event today. It's an honor to be able to join you. As we just get the slides up, and we'll go to the next one. So initially, I'd just like to give you a quick background on just in terms of the context for Australia right at this moment in terms of the COVID-19 status. We have a population of 24 million people in Australia, and we had really quite some success to be able to contain the outbreak of COVID-19 with 7,200 approximately cases, 102 deaths, and you can see on the right-hand side that the curve is certainly flattened. While there is still cases of COVID-19, it is definitely much small incidences now. So with that, we are now starting to see some freeing up of workplaces, people being able to move around the community, visit their families and so on. I'd like to go to the next slide. In terms of the government strategy, there's basically a three-step roadmap that the federal government laid out for Australia. And right now we are just stepping out of step one and into step two. So what that means is that in most states of Australia, you can now have gatherings of up to 20 people in your home, in your business or in public places. You're asked to work from home if you can. And in fact, in some states, including the state that I am in, Victoria, if you can work from home, you must continue to work from home. So at this stage, we anticipate until the end of July, employees and employers that can have their employees working from home must continue to do so. And then gradually, various organisations like gyms, beauty spas, galleries, and so on are gradually starting to open up, but not at all at this stage. At this point, there is only interstate travel between 2 states. The other borders are all closed, and what that means is we can also, we're not able to travel internationally or people to come in from other countries unless for extreme reasons. Physical distancing, the 1.5 metres continues in workplaces and in public places. The maintaining hand hygiene, practicing respiratory hygiene, staying home when there's any symptoms of illness. We also have a COVID safe app, which is voluntary for the Australian public to use, but highly encouraged. And there is a range of protocols and plans for workplaces and premises. That just gives a bit of an overview of where we are at the moment. If you'd like to move to the next slide. In terms of the case study.
Yes, actually we can go to that in the second round.
Sure, no problem.
Sharing specific details regarding how our practices have contributed to the performances. So it's very interesting that you shared how it is now. And in the social distance, you mentioned it is 1.5 meters. And another important thing that you mentioned is that if you can work from home, you are encouraged to work from home. So now thank you. So now from Melbourne, we move to Silicon Valley. We have one of our expatriates. So let me introduce him. He's none other than Mr. Lahiru Gunathilaka. Mr. Gunathilaka is a technology expert with more than 10 years of experience. And he has been working in technology companies in Silicon Valley, California for the last 5 years. He has worked on very large organizations and very small startups as well. And he has seen how startups have evolved and how they build up new teams for a common goal. He's a product of University of Moratuwa, and he has obtained his MSc from Indiana University. And he's currently doing business studies at Harvard Business School. So Lahiru, it's over to you to share the basic background on US, probably on California or in Silicon Valley. And then in the second round, we will move into details. Over to you.
Thank you, Chandan. I'm very happy to participate in this webinar, and then thank you very much for the opportunity. And hello, everybody else. I'm Lahiru. I resides in Northern California, Silicon Valley area. I work for a large information technology corporation. We have offices around the world, roughly about 100,000 employees. And I can speak on behalf of my organization and also in general information technology organizations based in Silicon Valley. We have companies like Apple, Apple headquarters of corporations like Apple, Google, Facebook, Netflix, Uber, Airbnb. And some of these companies were badly affected. As an example, I think Apple, Airbnb are very badly affected, very kind of like affected badly compared to other corporations. My organization is somewhat affected, but it's not terribly affected by other places like airline business or travel business or anything like that. So if I talk about like organization wise, so far we've been doing pretty good, even though we hit the pandemic, like because our revenue comes from online services. So in spite, we have hit a very high amount of traffic during the pandemic, because everybody's working remotely and they have more access to the online services. So just to give a little bit of baseline before we go into deep about how we decide certain things within our organization, we as I said, revenue wise, it was not terribly affected. We had thought that it's very hard to ramp up new engineers in our organization. Generally, in a normal time, we have a very thorough 2 weeks or a little bit more orientation program, and we decided not to hire new engineers at this point, because it's unfair for them to come in on board remotely. Our orientation in general was in-person orientation with many new introductions of our systems and all these things. So we kind of paused our hiring.
Yeah, Tharindum, actually, you can go into details of HR practices you did.
Yeah. So yeah, over to you, Chandra. So we'll talk about details in next round.
Thank you. So we are much waiting in anticipation to see how the Silicon Valley or your particular organization did to come out of this, and how actually HR has come to help it. So now it's my pleasure to introduce the next panelist. He's Dr. Wilson Wong, the head of Insights and Futures of Chartered Institute of Personnel and Development, UK. Wilson leads in Futures and Foresight's capability. He has been involved in futures research since 2000. He has published many, and one of his recent publications include with the Malaysian government, which focused on the future of talent in Malaysia in 2035. He has edited many volumes, and also he's a co-editor of Human Capital Management Standards. He represents the UK on human capital metrics, ISO TC 260 HR standards, and he's the independent chair of the Human Capital Standards Committee and deputy chair of the Knowledge Management Standards Committee at the BSI. His career has spanned academia, corporate finance, and national ICT development policy. Wilson's PhD is in economic psychology, behavioral economics, and he's a visiting professor at Nottingham Business School, and he is in many boards, editorial committees, and advisory boards, which focus on work and equality. He's a member of the International Association of Applied Psychology and an academic fellow of CIPD, and he was called to the bar in 1990. So without further ado, I would like to invite Dr. Wilson Wong to share what has been the background in UK with the pandemic, and in the, so you can say that briefly, and in the second round, you can give details of the particular organization related to the HR practices. Over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Chandana. Could you open the slide deck, please? Great. I think we can go straight to the second slide. So the UK hasn't been spared the pandemic. We are in absolute terms, we have the third largest number of fatalities of any country in the world. The number now exceeds 40,000 deaths from COVID-19 confirmed. How it's impacted the economy is that some 30% of employees in this country are now furloughed. They are now paid by the state. So in effect, a third of the private sector pay bill is paid by the government now. And that it translates to 8.9 million jobs from about 1.1 million employees across the land. And this furlough scheme alone is going to cost the UK government, the taxpayer, some 80 billion pounds. So you can see that the country is considerably poorer. The economy has shrunk by a fifth. So we are 20% smaller than we were a year ago. And right now, the economy is now restarting. And there are, of course, concerns about how the economy can restart. Could we have the next slide, please? So I work for the Chartered Institute of Personnel and Development, and it's a professional body supporting HR. And as you imagine, this is a crisis on people. And the frontline staff in managing people here would be the HR professionals across the land and in so many of these organizations who are trying to navigate the changing parameters of this crisis. So as a professional body, how we decided to support the HR profession was, one, open up all the resources in our library and curate the materials around COVID, business continuity, risk, workforce planning, and to make that open to not just members, but to any organization. And one of the organizations that is relying on that content is the UK Civil Service. The other thing that we did was to try to bring the profession together, to bring a sense of communal support. And so we ran a campaign on HR Together and started highlighting how different organizations were coping and responding to the crisis. And on the 20th of May, we celebrated with the members on International Human Resources Day, where we ran an online quiz and really just to get a sense of solidarity across the profession. And we did that together with the World Federation and the European Association. So it was a chance for us to just share notes, at least across the European countries when we ran it in the European time zone. The other thing that we did was to work with the British Standards Institution. As Dr. Chandana mentioned, I chair the Human Capital Standards Committee there. And one of the things that the BSI has done is to curate all the government guidance and translate it into a guidance for, certainly for SMEs. And what we've done is we've assembled all the experts in risk, business continuity, health and safety, and various sectorial bodies to craft a guidance note for companies who are trying to prepare themselves for recovery. And I can talk about the document later. But this is, and one of the other things that we've done is to continue the learning and development process for the profession. During this crisis, there's a huge amount of learning that has to be done. Learning even just to use communication platforms like Zoom. But one thing we committed to our members was to continue the conferences. So we've just completed the Festival of Work, a 3-day conference with 80 speakers. And that was shared with 26,000 members, and it was shared with them free. And last week, we ran a research conference in Hong Kong to serve the profession in the Asia Pacific region. So that's one of the things that we've tried to do in supporting organizations here and across the world.
So
Back to you, Dr. Chandana.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Wilson. It's very heartening to hear that they have tried to bring in a sense of solidarity across professionals. Yeah, this is the time that we have to get together. So we are eagerly waiting to hear about the details of the HR practices, which starts from now. But before we go to the next round, we would like just to share a couple of polls with you, just to share your ideas on that. So please feel free to vote on, to indicate what your response. So here goes the first one. It says, how many strains of coronavirus have been found so far? I will give a few more seconds before we stop. Okay, and now I will share the results. Actually, the least number of answers are for the right answer. They have found about 34 strains, mutations of coronavirus. So more than 30 is the closest answer. So that is just to share our understanding, and then we will go to another question. That is just to see that how many have been found to be infected with COVID-19 world over. So we end this poll now. So I will share the results. So I'm happy to see that this time we have selected the right answer, about 7.7 million. That means 1 out of every 1,000 have got affected from COVID-19. So those are some COVID facts. We will come back to polls later. Now let me invite Mr. Sloan to share his experience of the selected Chinese organization and what have been the HR practices that have helped them to be successful.
Okay, thank you, Doctor. And it's my pleasure to hear all those kind of precious comments from our professional friends around the world. Now I'm going to do a little bit more sharing of the selected case here in China. That is based on this Sanyi group. So we'll be starting with introduction of Sanyi group. Sanyi group is one of the world's leading heavy equipment manufacturers in the world. There are three leading brands in this industry and have been like worldwide reputable. The number one is Caterpillar from USA, and Sanyi and Komatsu. They used to compete a lot for the second place. And end of last year, the fourth quarter of last year, Sanyi has surpassed Komatsu and to be the number one in the heavy equipment manufacturing industry in the world. And the total turnover, the annual turnover last year of Sanyi Group is $10.65 billion US. And the total employees of Sanyi right now is 14,149. And so they did not, because of the coronavirus, they did not increase their number of employees, because usually at the beginning, right after the Chinese New Year, there will be a certain increase of the employees, especially for Sanyi Group, which has been going through the drastic increase in the recent 5 years. But this time, because of the coronavirus, they just keep the figure like this. They did not put new employees. That is the case for their employment now, for the number of employees. So which is right now is still around 14,000 of the total number of employees in Sanyi Group. And okay, so this very interesting like achievement which Sanyi has just done recently. I think this is a very famous video clip on the YouTube. That is how China has built a hospital in 10 days, starting from 24th of January and the 1st of February. It's a hospital of over 2,000 beds, was built in 10 days. And most of the earth equipment and the machineries which have been used and applied for building the hospitals are actually provided by Sanyi Group. So that is one of the important backgrounds of its importance and of its contribution for compacting for the fighting against coronavirus in China and in January and February. So, and this is a snapshot of the latest of the from the website of Sanyi. So you can see those are the products, the categories of products which they are currently doing. mostly cover all the categories of the heavy equipment and machineries. And on their news panel, we can see they have stressed that Sany's global supply chain remains strong in the pandemic. And Sanyi stands out when the world still in a downturn. Means even during the pandemic, the Sanyi group is still operating quite smoothly, and their supply chain is not that much adversely affected. And then their entire team is working kind of smooth and efficient and effective manner. So during this kind of procedure, the HR department is playing a significant role in doing all those kind of coordination among different kind of departments. So how they have achieved it? So we can have a closer look. So their HR strategies deployed to combat COVID-19. There's a very important background. As prior to the pandemic outbreak, Sanyi has already developed these 3-pillar plus 6 modules HR operational cloud. So this is like in China, most of the middle or large scale, or even those kind of some small SMEs, they are trying to develop what we call the HR operational cloud. Especially for the SMEs right now, because of the pandemic, because of the work from home kind of situation, the HR operational cloud is becoming more and more critical. Because nobody knows, because like right now in China, some people are saying that the second wave is coming soon. Like if you read about the news in Beijing, what is happening yesterday, they have about like 47 like newly founded positive cases in one day. So that is kind of scary case. That is kind of scary numbers, which has caused some like new strategies. Now some like the new restrictions has been applied by the local government in Beijing. So the companies, whether it's like the SMEs or those kind of middle scale or someone like Sanyi, they cannot foresee whether the kind of second wave or third wave of pandemics coming back or not. So stay at home. So such HR operational cloud as the essential to support the working from home or those kind of remote or remote working conditions under the new normalcy has become a very much essential weapon, a platform for different kind of scale of companies. So this HR operational cloud, that is for the 3 pillars and the 6 modules, I think that is very much well known to most of the HR professionals around the world already. Anything is like how we can utilize this real case, which is happening right now behind us, beside us, and to eventually integrate those kinds of 3 ethical pillars or modules under one operational cloud, which can be eventually put into execution. So that is actually the HR department of Sanyi Group, what they have encountered and what they have adjusted and self-evolved themselves during the pandemic. So I will not go to the details to explain the subsection of the 3 pillars and 6 modules. Basically, because the content should be familiar for most of the audiences and our honorable guests here. So I just like skip the description of the details of the content. Okay. So, but laterally we can, I think we can share the presentation and then so that we can keep on discussion for that. And so based on this operational cloud, this HR operational cloud, and what are the challenges that Sanyi Group, the HR department of Sanyi Group, they have to face and solve? So those are the like 7 major challenges when it comes to working from home kind of like situation. The first one is it is very difficult to know the real working status, the real working status of the employee. Are they eventually working, or they are having like some like personal leisure and some enjoyment? So how are they going to balance the working responsibilities and leisure enjoyment while they are working from home? So this is the first challenge. The second one is difficult to evaluate the working load and the quality of the employee. And the third one is working from home will make employees feel lonely and mentally uncomfortable, as they have been separated with their familiar working environment and colleagues, plus the uncertainties for the adverse effects for their future career and work. Yes, we know that there are some cases happening in Sri Lanka and in China and different countries. Well, right after the working from home, some of the people, like, they have to stay from home and even without work, because there's no job opportunities, or they have been sort of like technically has been reduced from their company. So this kind of like uncertainty for their future of the career will cause this kind of mental uncomfortable feeling. So that is the difficulty. That is the third challenge. The fourth one is the efficiency of coordinative teamwork has been significantly reduced. But even though we have those kind of high technology platform like Zoom, for example, like we can easily be communicating and connecting with each other. But the 2D, this is all what we're talking about, is the 2D interaction is far less like what we can see is far less efficient, approachable as compared to the 3D interaction, which can be happening during our real working environment. So this kind of 2D is not that much efficient enough. I don't know whether you can have this kind of feeling or not, but that is like something like we can obviously like witnessed already. So that is why this coordinated teamwork the efficiency has been like significantly reduced. The fifth challenge is that there are more risks for the leaking of secure information, especially for the R&D personnel, because there will be lots of like internet, IT-based communication and documentation sharing like that. So it happens from time to time. Some like this kind of like confidential information will be leaked unintentionally. So that is a challenge 5. And challenge number 6 is since it's a sudden outbreak and lockdown, there's no pre-training for working from home mechanism. So that is like for most of the countries at the initial stage, like everybody is sort of in the chaos. And we spend quite a lot of time and to regulate and make everything back to sort of controllable manner. And number 7, I think that is the most important point that I want to like stress time and time again during my sharing, is that HR department is lacking of professional knowledge and understandings for the working content of other departments, especially those technology-oriented kind of department or the marketing and sales department. It's usually what China side is like the Chinese HR department is like sitting there, like doing those kind of basically is like to checking your performance and calculating your salaries, your holidays, and to giving this kind of like very sort of like remote external support, like beside away from their core business or away from their core working content. HR department usually does not involved into this kind of depth. But because of the coronavirus, because of working from home, there will be new requirements for the performances of the HR department, how they can be like deeply, how they can be more deeply involved into the core content, into the core business of the organization, so that they will be able to carry out and provide more micro level support in different kind of sections. So that is how we have to emphasize the importance to improve their understanding of the micro level, like operational segment. So otherwise, they will be feeling, as what we have mentioned here, they will be feeling very much difficult to follow up the comprehensive working quantity and quality of each of the departments under the organization.
Thank you, Mr. Swan, for sharing this interesting 3+6 digital HR operational cloud, and also focusing on the mental aspects, how it really affects, because technology is not the panacea for everything. So maybe there are some questions coming up, so we can further discuss on this. We thank you for sharing this successful HR practices from China. And now we will move to Melbourne, to Miss Rosemary. Over to you. I will share your slides.
Thank you. The case study I'd like to focus on is actually my own organisation, the Australian HR Institute. And like every other organisation, I guess in the world, or nearly every organisation, we also have been impacted in terms of the way we operate as an organisation and as an employer. And Just waiting for those slides to come up. Great, thank you. So ARI is the Association for HR Professionals in Australia. Similar to CIPD and CIPM, we provide a wide range of learning and development opportunities in HR, people management and business skills. And as a national body, ARI provides education and networking opportunities across Australia, including delivery of a world-class convention every year. We also commend excellence in HR across Australia through our annual ARI Awards. ARI as an organisation is a not-for-profit organisation. It's owned by its members. It's governed by a board of directors with a council of state presidents. We employ approximately 60 employees, predominantly administrative employees, but with a range of other, accountants, small HR team, IT, and so on. We service about 20,000 members, and our office is based in the Central Business District of Melbourne. Prior to the pandemic, ARI had flexible work policies in place for their employees, for our employees. But the way that those flexible work policies was, they were implemented by agreement with the manager. So if there was no agreement and it didn't really suit the business, then they were limited. So while we had some employees take up flexible work, all employees were office-based, with some people occasionally working from home. In terms of our demographic, 70% of our employees use public transport to travel to the city. So when the pandemic, I guess, but March 19th was really when in Victoria we started making rapid decisions about the need to work from home. So our organisation did a stress test with 1 day work from home to test our technology capability. We really assumed that we made an assumption employees would know how to work from home, but particularly we had to test our technology. And then 4 days later, while we were going to do a split roster, we realised that all employees had to be directed to work from home. So it was actually the first time that the entire organisation had worked remotely. And at this point, we plan to work from home, 100% from home, until the end of July at the earliest. What that also meant from a business perspective and servicing our members, that we had to cancel all face-to-face training, all conferences and face-to-face events till further notice. So we shifted rapidly to virtual and online offerings. As a result of the reduction in our revenue stream, we also then had to, over the following weeks and months, make some adjustment to the size of our workforce for us to remain sustainable. We'll go to the next slide. So what were some of the HR initiatives that have supported our business to stay in business? First approach was we really needed to understand every individual employee's situation and consideration. We conducted regular, I should say, pulse surveys, regular check-ins between employees and managers. So rather than just weekly or monthly check-ins, we started off with every manager checking in on a daily basis with their employees through Zoom or through Microsoft Teams. We provided a lot of support and a range of support, whether it's just practical support for employees to improve their work from home arrangements, taking home office chairs, providing additional computer screens, through to the need for increased emotional support, promoting programs such as our employee assistance program. We also took the opportunity post moving to working from home and post lockdown for managers to receive specific training around managing employees effectively remotely. So we conducted this training remotely, and it was really a sort of a just-in-time training. From a communications perspective, they became rapidly increased, and with transparent communications. We recognised that the decline in revenue and the impact on the economy globally and in Australia meant that a lot of employees would be fearful about their own job security, and so we had to ensure that there was frequent messages from the CEO. We conducted weekly virtual staff meetings, and as I mentioned, having initial daily check-ins from managers. So in that first stage, in the first weeks, there was a high focus on employee health and well-being, physical health, but certainly mental health and well-being, noting that everyone was in an environment of social isolation, as they were not able to leave their households, let alone to come into the workplace. So we recognised that that was going to definitely impact some people quite negatively. As time went on and our business, I guess, stabilised to the extent that we became, we were able to, I guess, predict a bit better the take-up of different programs and the impact on the business, we then had to start making workforce adjustments through standing employees down on unpaid leave, in some cases taking redundancies. Like many other countries, we had significant government subsidies to employers. In Australia, the JobKeeper program has been quantified, been costing the Australian government spending about 70 billion Australian dollars. So it's a substantial program and certainly of assistance to all employers, including our own. But it was that period was a challenging time for the need for communication and providing specific employee support. We also then started pivoting into consulting employees to start thinking about what the eventual return to the office might look like. So while we were very much focused on how do we work more productively from home, we did want to engage employees in thinking about what the eventual return to the office might look like. And as an organisation, our CEO has taken the opportunity to really embark on an organisational transformation. Part of that is a digital transformation. We recognise that not only 2020 is a year that we've never seen before, but 2021 will also, from a revenue and from an economy perspective, also be very different. So it really provided not only just the opportunity, but the absolute need for us to change, including culture change through job redesign, change to our systems, change to ways of working.
So thank you, Ms. Rosemary. Now it's interesting to note that you started by focusing on the well-being, especially the mental well-being of the employees, and then you focused on the performance and also about this digital transformation, which is actually happening all over the world. And it's very interesting to note that HR organizations now, RE, even CIPD, and even CIPM Sri Lanka, actually we all are doing very well in these situations. So this is a very good opportunity to showcase that we really practice HR, and that whatever challenges, probably they have not like ever before, but still there is always hope when you focus energies and strategize on HR. So thank you very much for sharing that. We will later come back maybe to answer a few questions. I would like to continue the poll before we move to the next one, next presenter. So please answer. What do you think, what has been the most affected industry so far due to COVID-19? We are sure that many have got affected? Among them, what do you think is the most affected one? So we are having a clear majority, and that's the correct answer. Actually, it is tourism and leisure. We move to the next one. So we are discussing about the term new normal. This is a word, buzzword with COVID-19. What does it really mean? We are getting interesting responses. So the majority is with the right answer. So we mean that a situation which has been unfamiliar previously has become the standard. And we move to the final poll question. Many things will be result in the new normal, but also we can expect the new normal will not result in. Interesting answers. So the majority have the right answer. Yes, we cannot expect increased investments by employers because people try to have fiscal conservation in times of pandemics and great recessions like this. So thank you for your responses. Now we will move to Dr. Wong to share specific details from UK of a selected organization. So over to you, Dr. Wong.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Chandana. So as we've all realized, this pandemic is a particular kind of crisis in that it actually is one that is unusual in that it isn't a failure of a particular part of the system like we had in the financial crisis. It's actually an attack on people. It's a situation where people's lives are being threatened. And so for organizations, their human capital is being attacked. And I said earlier that one of the things that we tried to do was, as a professional body, was to recognize that HR was one of those frontline professions, because for organizations where the human capital is being endangered, the HR function is extremely important in the preservation of that capital. So we were concerned about the welfare, well-being, and the professionalism and the professional support that they required. And one of the things we did, as I said earlier, was that we ran a campaign called HR Together, really to surface some of the good practices across the country, and to then share those experiences with other organizations in celebration, but also in the spirit of learning. And one of the organizations that we featured was the City of Edinburgh Council. I would talk a little bit more about how the CIPD responded, but we can take that in the Q&A later. But for this organization, it is important because this is the organization that keeps the City of Edinburgh running. It has 18,500 staff delivering over 700 public services, including teaching, social care, engineering, looking at waste and cleaning of the city, catering for people who are vulnerable and school children. And of the 18,500 staff that they have on their payroll, 7,500 are considered essential workers. And they cannot work from home. They have to be outside maintaining services to keep the city and its citizens alive. So when this crisis occurred, and it occurred very quickly in the UK, the organization then had to respond and decide what it was going to do, right? As all of us had to do very suddenly. And in such a crisis, leaders are then faced with making decisions, usually for the very first time, if you haven't rehearsed some of these risks. And it is at these moments of crisis that the quality or lack of quality of your leadership is exposed. So one of the first things that Edinburgh City Council did was that they decided first what their principles were. And they said, we are a fair work employer. We will adhere to our principles. And one of the first things that their staff will be concerned with is their security. what is going to happen to their jobs, how are they going to feed their children, how are they going to pay their mortgages, how are they going to live. So what the council did was they announced to all their staff that they will be on full pay for the staff who are self-isolating, off sick, or unable to work because their building has been closed. And the organization also then communicated the support that they would give to those people who had to be isolating or otherwise, unable to work because of circumstances. So they were then treated as a special leave, and only when they actually became physically ill would sick leave policies be activated. They also decided that the supply teachers and the casual workers that were hired by the council on rolling contracts would be compensated for their lost earnings right through this period, because they did not want to contribute to in-work poverty in the city. They also agreed that no council staff would be furloughed. That means they would not be using central government funds, because that would run against their principles. So once they communicated the message to keep their staff kind of worries about security at bay, the next thing was to then look at the health and safety of their employees and the people that their employees would be working with. So what they did was they set up a weekly health and safety meeting to look at, together with their procurement department, to start looking at issues that they had to deal with for all the different jobs that the city council has to run. To provide the right level of PPE, which is personal protection equipment, masks, gloves, face shields, and so on. And from the outset, they worked with the trade unions so that they would be able to communicate intelligence from the front line as to what the dangers and risks could be, what is the level of PPE required, and whether there were any ways of re-engineering the processes so that they would be less at risk. And then the other thing that they did was then rapidly ratchet up the health and safety e-learning materials so that all staff could bone up very quickly on the e-learning on health and safety procedures in a COVID-19 situation. And some of them would be live webinars, some would be recorded, some of it will be one-to-one counseling for managers who ran particularly sensitive functions. So the second stage of ensuring that the staff knew that they were going to be looked after in terms of their safety in this, against this pandemic, they had to then communicate it and to re-engage a workforce that was already dispersed. And as I said, this is a crisis of human capital, of people, and basically your human capital is largely locked in their homes. So what they did was engagement, they used the trade unions channels, that regular soundings with the membership through the trade unions, but they also did the CEO also did a weekly video log on a range of issues, mainly to provide information and reassurance to the workforce. And some of the staff, because they are out and about providing services, they're not actually in council offices. They don't actually have an email account. And of course, email was the standard route of disseminating council organizational information to their staff. So within 2 weeks, they launched an app for the 4,000 staff that didn't have an email account, so that the staff could then access learning, they could access policies, they could access communication conduits with their managers as well as with their peers. So this gave the council a way of reaching out to them and engaging them in the changing circumstances of this crisis. From the end, and of course there was the HR function itself that had to be re-engineered very quickly in that crisis. The first thing that they did was, in order to support their staff, they needed to update all their reporting categories almost overnight. So in 48 hours, they had in their systems recorded staff that were vulnerable, those who were working from home, those who were unable to work from home, those who were isolating, those in quarantine. All this information was captured in a system that was developed within 48 hours of the crisis. And that, of course, then allows HR to then activate all the support mechanisms because they know how to direct the resources. As you can imagine, with a council with all these services, recruitment and onboarding is an ongoing thing. So in a crisis, the last thing you do is not recruit. You need the talent flow to continue. You need to provide the services to keep the city alive. So that the week that we were locked down, they already had 90 people with job offers or new starts the following week. So they started remote onboarding, providing e-resources, pointing them to the resources which were there already. And for critical roles requiring face-to-face training and induction, you can imagine when you're doing care work or sensitive work, you may need to be trained in person. So all these had to be re-engineered in a week to make sure that the face-to-face inductions, onboarding, and briefings were all done for them to work safely following the social distancing adjustments. And successfully, they managed to onboard 90 people the week after lockdown. And you can imagine with this kind of fluidity, they have to, of course, continue paying their staff. And right through the crisis, they maintained a 99.5% accuracy in payroll. And what they did was they changed their pay slips from electronic pay slips, interestingly, to hard copies, because they wanted their staff, again, to have reassurance that they were being paid, that they could meet their bills, and also to use the posting out of their pay slips as another means of communicating with their staff. So they would enclose with the pay slips updates of things, stories about, celebrating how different parts of the organization are coping with the COVID thing. And also they had to make sure that all those pensioners who are under the council would also be looked after, So they had while they went into lockdown, they had to continue to maintain a £7.5 billion pension fund to pay the pensions of previous workers. So that also had to be maintained in terms of accuracy and continued active management of the fund. Needless to say, there was a lot of people home working. So there was a lot of communications, a lot of adjustments. They were surveyed to make sure that their health and safety would be all right, that there were secure, safe places for them to work. And for those people who couldn't work safely from home, arrangements would be made for them to be housed in a special facility or elsewhere. And as you imagine, with a crisis like this, some jobs would be extremely heavy. The workload would be extremely heavy suddenly. And for some jobs, you find yourself with a lot of free time. So what the HR department had to do with their OD team was to repurpose staff to priority areas, supported by re-engineered learning and development packages delivered online and face-to-face. And all these had to be done within a fortnight. One of the things that the council took on board was because a lot of small businesses in the city were in danger of closure, and for them to then lose thousands and thousands of jobs. So people would lose, they didn't want to create this crisis in the city. So the city council undertook to manage and administer the Scottish Government Business Support Grant. And this then gave grants to small businesses to ensure that they could then continue to survive during this crisis. So they used their administrative capability within the council, repointed their staff some of their staff to administer this scheme to save Scottish companies. And they had over 6,000 applications in 2 weeks, of which 99% of the applications were delivered within 2 weeks after submission of application. and dispersed 83 million pounds to these small businesses. That means from the time the scheme was announced to the application to the thing was within a month. So all these companies had dispersed grants from the Scottish government using the City of Edinburgh Council mechanisms. So, you know, it is really, really tough times. And so you can imagine that for an organization of this size, having so many essential workers, the change was enormous. But what they did throughout was to focus on the health, safety, and security of their people, and told the people that they should look after their physical, psychological, emotional health first, and we will support them. And they communicated to them that they trusted them to do the right thing. So the leaders, of course, provided very clear instructions. So some things you have to command and control, right? Because you have to maintain certain standards. They communicated the decisions, they listened to their people, and then they responded. And they told the people, please don't judge your peers by your standards. Everybody is adjusting differently. Be kind. We trust you to do the right thing. And as far as productivity, they redeployed smartly. They used the whole HR mechanism and the central database of the workforce to then redeploy, because they knew certain parts were really overworked and certain parts suddenly had very little to do. But throughout they communicated that you are all professionals. You've been hired to do a public service. We're trusting you to support, to the manager to do the right things, the workers to do the right things, and for us to then work through to support the City of Edinburgh together. Back to you, Dr. Chintana.
Thank you, Dr. Wilson. Now, one of the dilemmas for HR professionals is to look after the employee well-being and also to maintain productivity. So this case study of Edinburgh City Council is inspirational in that way, because UK has been among the countries which has been badly hit by the COVID, and still the death toll is counting. So it's really heartening to see what HR practices can do, and how you can be empathetic, and also how you can be results oriented. Thank you for that lovely piece of information.
Thank you.
Now we move back to the Silicon Valley to Mr. Lahiru Gunathilaka. So we are interested to hear from you the specific HR practices followed by tech giant, and what has been the results. Over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Chandan. So let me share my screen. Do you see my screen?
Yes.
So I'll be talking like briefly, kind of like more specific things that my organization was working on in 3 different stages. Like first talk about pre-lockdown, and then during the lockdown, what we have done, and then how are we planning to do the post-lockdown, basically return to office plan. And it's that part is not properly decided, like completely finalized yet, but I would like to talk like briefly high level plan. First, when we first hit our first very few cases in our neighboring northern state, Washington, where there was some people got sick in an elderly home, and we realized this is going to come towards California too. So we gave the option of people working from home, but at that stage we claimed it's an option. Like, just to give you a little context, we as an organization support coming to the office and work collaboratively, and we believe it's very productive. And then we provide a lot of nice office structure, office space, and then we provide breakfast, lunch, dinner pretty much every day. And we have a shuttle service from 50 different locations in this area, so that people don't have to drive on the traffic. So we were more focused on initially, before this crisis, we were supporting like people to come together and then work as a team in one place. So, but given the situation, getting coming things to the United States, we moved to a place where initially optional working from home. And then when things got a little bit worse, and we claimed, okay, we recommend working from home from this point downwards. So if you really want to come to office, you can still come, but recommended working from home phase. And then within like 48 hours from this stage, we moved to mandatory working from home in the US. And then it propagated to other countries based on the situation. And then at some point, we were like closed down pretty much all the offices, and then very few people could come to the office, and every office was locked down. Like you don't have access to get into the office. And this was pretty much like high level what we did pre-lockdown stage. And let's talk about what we did during the lockdown. One of the most important things I found we did was the communication. So when this pandemic happened, what we did was we call for volunteers within the company, and then we created within a very short period of time, we created a center place of communication to our employees. So there's one place that you could just go. It's an internal website where we have pretty much everything that you need to know about how to handle things during the lockdown. Like there's so much complication, there's so much confusion when you were immediately forced to work from home. So how should I how many hours should I work, and what is my goal for this quarter, and all these problems, and communicated through this channel. So I think this was a very good decision where we have spent allocated resources for like a better communication. So every time something changes, we could clearly see that this was updated. And then if I wanted to get more information about my vacation, about my parental leave or things like that, everything was clearly communicated. And then we iteratively changed the content very aggressively with the support of volunteers. So I found this was very helpful. I personally went to this internal site and then got really useful information. And pretty much like a lot of other things were communicated through this channel. I will be talking in next few sections. And then we have internally in a normal time that you could order things to your desk at home. You could order a desktop, you could order like headphones, things like that. And then among the few options that you have, so before the lockdown, so we continue to do that. Instead of shipping it to your desk, it was shipped to your home. And then this home office was supported in 2 stages. So initially you could order things from what similar to what you used to do, but ship it to your home. And then next phase was like you could just shop whatever you want to get to your home office, like a desk chair, headphones, things like that, from wherever place that you like, and then we will reimburse. Like there was a dollar cap for this, and depending on the location. So you could just shop things and then make yourself comfortable and order things for your home office. And one more thing happened was within our organization, we have 2 performance cycles per year. So we have one sometime in April and sometime end of September, if I remember correctly. Yeah. So one of the early one, like in April, we had to postpone the performance evaluation. For some people, this was okay, but some people who were planning and then working anxiously, working very hard, postponing their vacation, working very hard for their promotion, they got disappointed. Like obviously, management and HR knew this is going to come. So this was very clearly communicated that if you will get promoted end of the year, you will be compensated for the missing few months. So if you get promoted end of the year next cycle, and you will be compensated from April. So this was just a matter of you have to wait. And there is another thing that when we go for promotions, if you go for promotion and you don't get a promotion in April, you will be given a feedback that, okay, you did not get promoted because these specific things, and then you will miss this feedback if we postpone the performance evaluation in April. So what we did was we gave the feedback, but there was no decisions made or promotions were given. So we are hoping to do the next promotion cycle sometimes October, September. And then we allocated a lot of resources for the mental health. We communicated these things through our communication channel that I was talking before. We had webinars organized. We had a lot of content provided through our communication channel for how to be mentally health, and then provide encouraging employees to going through these things. Again, like leadership actually encourages from the CEO to each level. Now, one of the things that I noticed was it wasn't just the CEO sending an email encouraging people, but each level in the leadership was like following up with their own experience, with their own expertise. Like I remember seeing one of the CEOs. We have multiple CEOs. One of the CEOs was talking how he and his mother encounter mental health issues, and then how they recovered as a family, and then encourage people to consider this content that we created, and how to follow them, and then be as a family, how to be mentally health. So I personally found it very, very useful by encouraging these things from the leadership and each individual level. And other thing that we did was like team level. How should we be motivated? Like one thing we did was like we have different set of tools to how to work remotely, and also different set of tools in generally how we use at the office. So we spend more resources, and then we allocated more resources, and then make those tools more productive and more efficient, and make our employees more productive. And other things like team level things we did was like we organized things like every day, every weekend, every week on Friday we play. We allocated some time and we play some kind of a online game as a team. And also things like during the strict lockdown period, we arranged like you could cook home food and then take a photo, and then we would do a photo challenge, or things like we would do during the last few weeks we organized things like general photo challenges, or maybe one interesting thing we did was like each team has their own budget for fun events. So my organization HR team organized things like sending out snacks for your home. So every week you get some snacks box. So that was.
Thank you, Lahiru. The example you have given about the Silicon Valley, where you find a culture which needs a lot of dynamism, interaction, togetherness, and with a virtual lockdown of more than 2 months, still within this period of time, people were able to ensure that organizations continue. You clearly mentioned that how well they managed the mental health and the well-being of the employees while looking after themselves to make sure that they can operate from home offices. If we look at the specific details shared by our panelists from all over the world, starting from China, then London, United Kingdom, from Melbourne in Australia, and also from California, we can very clearly find that when you look after human resources, they themselves look after organizations. This is a classic example that people run business. As long as you make sure the employees are looked after, as long as empathy is being given to the realities which are faced by the employees, it's always possible for organizations to thrive forward even in difficult times. We had case examples of the success enjoyed by the construction organization in China. How the Edinburgh City Council looked after its employees, its members. How the Association of Human Resource Institute in Melbourne, Australia, took initiatives to ensure that employees are looked after and that employees make sure that business is safeguarded. And we also discuss in Silicon Valley the initiatives they took and how successfully employees have been supporting organizations, operating from offices. And it's also interesting that they are considering giving employees the option to work from home, and also looking after the transition, the mental transition employees experience in returning to work. So being flexible on that. We are facing a darkest period due to the pandemic, which we call COVID-19. At the same time, this also gave us an opportunity to investigate the power of human resources, the impact of HR strategies and HR practices, and the potential of them to ensure organizations are looked after and they achieve the objectives even during the most challenging times. At the beginning of this webinar, I mentioned we value research because the findings helps us to analyze and to understand about theories. And the theories add value when they are put into practices, which generates value in the execution of business practices. We are thankful to our 4 panelists, Dr. Wilson Wong, CIPD, United Kingdom, Ms. Rosemary Guyett, the Institute of Human Resource Australia, HRI, Sloan Liu from China, and Gunathilaka from Silicon Valley, California, United States of America. Every dark cloud has a silver lining. The darkness of pandemic has proven beyond doubts the potential in good HR strategies and HR practices. The importance of changing and managing them to ensure that you look after the well-being of employees, which helps to run the organizational goals and to ensure achievement of them. The Applied Research Committee of the Chartered Institute of Personnel Management Sri Lanka is thankful and feels so happy that we got this opportunity to share this information, detailed HR strategies and practices with our audiences.